Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Now the top stories this hour. World leaders react to the passing of Pope Francis. And President Bola Tinubu expected back in Nigeria on Monday as 2-week vacation in Europe comes to an end. Zimbabwe's war veterans up the tempo, call for 2 days of protests and the resignation of President Emerson Mnangagwa. Now details coming up shortly. Welcome again. Now let's start by telling you that President Bola Tinubu on Monday joined world leaders to mourn the passing of Catholic Pontiff Pope Francis. The head of the Catholic Church died on Easter Monday at the age of 88 after a prolonged battle with bilateral pneumonia. He noted that Francis was a steadfast advocate for the developing world who consistently spoke against economic injustice. Pope Francis became the head of the Catholic Church in 2013 at the age of 76. Yet world leaders have expressed their condolences following the passing of the head of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis. Germany's Chancellor-in-waiting, Friedrich Merz, said he was filled with deep sorrow at the news, describing the Pope's death as a personal loss. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also paid tribute, saying the Pope inspired millions well beyond the Catholic Church with his humility and boundless love for the less fortunate. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he was deeply pained by the news. He said his heartfelt condolences were shared to global Catholic community. And Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif called Pope Francis a trailblazer for interfaith harmony, peace, and the betterment of humanity, describing his passing as an irreparable loss to the world. The world is mourning the loss of Pope Francis, the first pope from the Americas and a transformative figure in the Catholic Church, known for his humility, compassion, and also commitments to social justice. Francis redefined the papacy for the modern era. Our international correspondent Afia Hagen looks back at his remarkable life and legacy.
He was the Pope who shunned luxury for simplicity, choosing to live in a modest Vatican guest house rather than the papal apartments. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, on December the 17th, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, was the son of Italian immigrants. Before entering the priesthood, Bergoglio worked as a chemical technician and briefly as a bouncer. Ordained as a Jesuit priest in 1969, he rose through the ranks of the church, becoming the Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998 and a cardinal in 2001. From his early days to his historic election as the 266th Pope in 2013, his mission was clear: to bring the Catholic Church closer to the people. His papacy was defined by advocacy for the poor, environmental justice, and outreach to marginalized communities. He called for urgent action against climate change and emphasized global unity and compassion. Choosing the name Francis in honor of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the poor and the environment, he immediately signaled a papacy centered on humility, compassion, and social justice. Pope Francis challenged the Church to be a field hospital for the wounded, emphasizing pastoral care over rigid adherence to doctrine. But his papacy wasn't without controversy. He called for greater inclusion of LGBTQ+ Catholics, divorced couples, and women in leadership roles. That sparked both praise and criticism within the Church. Francis also tackled internal church issues, pushing for financial transparency and accountability in the wake of the clergy abuse crisis. On the world stage, he acted as a peacemaker, facilitating dialogue between Cuba and the United States, advocating for refugees and speaking out against war. Despite facing health challenges in his later years, Pope Francis remained active in his ministry, continuing to travel and inspire millions with his message of mercy and hope. As the bells toll across the Vatican, the world remembers a pope who sought not power but peace, not grandeur but grace. The Vatican says preparations are underway for Pope Francis's funeral, expected to draw world leaders and worshippers from across the globe. His legacy, however, will endure far beyond the walls of St. Peter's Basilica. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
Yet joining us now for more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagan for News Central. Afia, good morning. Thank you, or rather good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Do tell us what we should know about the Pope's death.
Not too many details yet. Hospital sources said a few minutes ago that the Pope passed away peacefully. We don't know if that was at his papal apartments or in hospital, but they have told us that he passed peacefully at 7:35 a.m. this morning. That's when we got that statement that said at 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the house of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and the Church. Now, that announcement was made by Cardinal Kevin Farrell in that statement from the Vatican. Now, the Pope had a pretty busy Easter period. On Monday, Thursday, he visited a prison in Rome for 30 minutes. On Holy Saturday, he visited St. Peter's Basilica in the evening. And on Sunday, he delighted the faithful just yesterday, Easter Sunday, by appearing on that balcony at St. Peter's Basilica. Now, he gave the blessing to the city of Rome and to the world. He did say, "Happy Easter, brothers and sisters," and he managed to say that without the nasal cannula that we have seen him with in recent weeks. It has helped him with his breathing. An aide read out the full address that he would usually give on Easter Sunday. But he did delight crowds by being there, by making his presence felt at St. Peter's Basilica. And it's thought the last sort of engagement that he did, so to speak, was a private meeting with J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. And then he made a statement again, on his thoughts on peace in Palestine, in Gaza. He was a pope that called churches in Gaza every single day, and even when he was in hospital, and he was able to do that, to check on his priests there. And we also know that tonight there's going to be a rosary held in St. Peter's Square at 6:30 p.m. local time. That will take place this evening.
It's a very weird kind of Easter weekend this weekend. I mean, it's a ritual, his Easter address. But so if you could tell us what has been the reaction from, Rome and also Roman Catholics across the world.
Well, in Rome and St. Peter's Square particularly, we've had the bells tolling this morning. You have lots of people gathering in that area to pay their respects and to mourn the passing of the Pope. You've got lots of reaction from world leaders. King Charles III has said that himself and his wife, Queen Camilla, were most deeply saddened to learn of the Pope's death. But the King was saying that he was glad that Pope Francis was able to share an Easter greeting with the Church on Sunday, a day before his death. The King and Queen also said they were greatly moved to have been able to visit Pope Francis just days before his death in that state visit where they celebrated their 20th anniversary. Now, UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer also paid tribute, saying his leadership in a complex and challenging time for the world and the Church was often courageous. It always came from a place of a deep humility. We've heard from the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who said in a national televised address that all flags would fly at half-mast at government buildings through Tuesday as a sign of respect for the late pontiff. He said for Australian Catholics, he was a devoted champion and a loving father. The Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said Pope Francis was a pioneer of interfaith harmony, peace, and the promotion of humanity. The Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, paid tribute to the Pope on X, calling him a good, warm, and sensitive man. US President Donald Trump paying his respects on X as well. And we've had lots and lots of reaction coming in from the French President, Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Chancellor in waiting, Frederick Merz, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. But all these tributes having this similar theme, praising his ability to be able to talk about war, famine, poverty, how incredibly important that was to him, that his life of service, his life of faith, his compassion, all these qualities that Pope Francis had really coming through in the tributes from world leaders and leading to thousands of the faithful who will now be in St. Peter's Basilica, and particularly, of course, for that rosary, like I said, is taking place at 6:30 p.m. this evening local time.
Okay, I would just like the viewers to know that what you're looking at are live pictures from the Vatican just there, as the Catholics mourn the Pope after his passing from just today. Once again, these are live pictures and videos from the Vatican. Afia, I'm going to put you to the side for just a second because we're being joined by Reverend Father George Odafe in Kaduna, Catholic priest in Kaduna here. Reverend Father George Odafe, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Grand. So I'd like to know, how is the Nigerian Catholic community taking the news of the Pope's death?
The Nigerian is taking it in pains. It is not easy to lose such a charismatic leader that he was. So as it is, we are in a period of mourning and praying and hoping that in the end, a good leader will be elected to replace him. So it is in great sorrow. We are mourning at the moment.
For many, the question has always been, when will Africa have a representative or an African pontiff? When will one emerge? Is this too soon to ask, or is it something that is a relevant question, one might ask?
It is a relevant question to ask because when the cardinals meet at the conclave to elect a new pope, anyone can be elected. It is the work of the Holy Spirit that guides and directs them in the election of pope. So it is possible that an African, one from sub-Saharan Africa, can be elected pope at the moment. But we have had in the past Africans as pope, but predominantly from what we now call the northern part of Africa. So sure, a pope can be elected from the conclave. We hope that will begin in 15-20 days' time.
Okay. And what about the legacy of Pope Francis? What will the legacy of Pope Francis be?
First of all, his care for the environment. It informs the reason why he chose the name Francis, following after the footsteps of St. Francis of Assisi, who was a man that lived a humble life, quiet life, was more interested in the spread of the gospel, and above all, care for the environment. So that alone is something that the Pope will be remembered for. Also, another important aspect of his legacy is the openness of the church to all hands being involved in the management of the church. In fact, his papacy introduced more women into key roles in the management of key offices that are in the Vatican. So for these two, the Pope will be greatly remembered among many, especially for his humility. And in fact, when he died, he asked that his funeral should be that of a pastor and a disciple of Christ, not that of an ex-pedostic.
Afia, back to you regarding the Pope's legacy. I'm wondering whether there are any political nuances that might be also included in there.
This will be remembered as the Pope who really decentralized the Catholic Church from Europe. You know, he was the first Pope from the global south, and he really grew populations of Catholics across Africa as well as Central and South America. And that will absolutely be part of his legacy, as well as being a Pope of mercy and inclusion. You know, he wanted everybody to be able to come to Jesus, whether they were part of the LGBTQ plus community, whether they were women, whether they were poor. You know, he always talked about remembering the poor. He talked about environmentalism as something that the church really had to look into. And climate justice and social advocacy were things that were really, really, really important to him, and work that he tried to do throughout his papacy. He was divisive, but he was also a visionary as well. And so I think he will be remembered in these ways also, and definitely that will be part of his legacy.
Well, Afia Hagen, Father George, thank you very much for being a part of our session this afternoon. Thank you. Moving on now. President Bola Tinubu is expected to return to Nigeria today following a 2-week working visit to Europe. The special advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Nanuga, announced Tinubu's return via an X post on Monday. Tinubu departed Abuja from Paris on the 2nd, or rather for Paris on the 2nd of April, for what the presidency described as a working visit. He has now been away for 19 days. During his absence, Nigeria has seen a spike in killings and abductions, particularly in Plateau and Benue states. Opposition figures, including former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, have raised concerns over the president's prolonged stay abroad, saying Nigeria is bleeding in his absence. We're now going to break, and when we get back, more news for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, he was the Pope who died after resurrection morning. As the period of his mourning comes into full force, the countdown to the election of a successor is also underway. Now, let's take a look at what the process is like for choosing a new pontiff.
Papacy becomes vacant due to the Pope's death or resignation. The leadership of the Catholic Church passes to the College of Cardinals. They begin by holding general congregations where they discuss key issues and prepare for the upcoming papal election, known as the conclave. Only cardinals under the age of 80, called cardinal electors, are eligible to vote. The process begins with the Mass for guidance in St. Peter's Basilica, invoking the Holy Spirit for assistance in making the right choice. The cardinals then process into the Sistine Chapel, take an oath of secrecy, and begin voting. 4 rounds of balloting are held each day, requiring a 2/3 majority for a candidate to win. If no pope is chosen, the ballots are burned, producing black smoke as a sign of no result. Once a cardinal receives the necessary votes, he accepts the election, chooses a papal name, and is dressed in papal vestments. The final ballots are burned with chemicals to create white smoke, signaling the election of a new pope. Finally, the senior cardinal deacon steps out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica and announces to the world, "Habemus Papam," meaning we have a pope. The new pope then appears to give his blessing to the people of Rome and the world. For News Central, I'm Ayo Olubusi.
Now on Easter, a former presidential aspirant of the All Progressives Congress, Tunde Bakare, has decried the relationship between the executive and legislative arms of government under President Bola Tinubu, asking the Nigerian leader to stop playing God. Bakare, the serving overseer of the Citadel Global Community Church, issued the warning in his State of the Nation address delivered in the Lagos auditorium of his church on Sunday. He raised the alarm over the state of the affairs in the country, saying Nigeria is steering in the wrong direction. Recalling the recent activities of the National Assembly, including the approval of a state of emergency in Rivers State, the suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, Bakare said the country's legislative arm of government is now an extension of the executive, grossly violating the principles of separation of powers and robbing, or rather rubber-stamping, the whims and caprice of President Tinubu's office.
Citizens at the center of this political banditry is the motor park brand of politics, nurtured by the old brigade politicians, and in recent times by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Mr. President, it is through your influence that the Nigerian National Assembly has become a haven for legislative rascality. Mr. President, it's under your watch that the National Assembly has become an extension of the executive, grossly violating the principles of separation of powers and rubber stamping the whims and caprices of your office, all while singing the international anthem of psychoviolence on your mandate we shall stand. Mr. President, thanks to your political machinations, Nigeria is now bedeviled by a captured National Assembly, the most ineffective.
The Bishop of the Sokoto Catholic Diocese, Matthew Hassan Kuka, has urged President Bola Tinubu to take urgent action to end the suffering and insecurity facing Nigerians. Delivering his Easter message, Bishop Kuka decried the culture of brutality and violence across the country, warning that Nigeria risks falling outside the bounds of human civilization. He described the country as turning into a national morgue, where citizens are abducted or killed daily by terrorists and criminal groups. The bishop appealed to President Tinubu to show leaders and decisiveness in restoring peace, saying Nigerians are hanging on the cross and at the mercy of forces of darkness. His message comes amid growing concerns over rising insecurity and hardship nationwide. Now, residents of Baruten Local Government Area in Kwara State have confirmed the presence of armed bandits operating in the northern part of the council. They say they came under attack over the weekend by bandits believed to have been pushed out of the northeast and northwest regions. Some residents were reportedly killed in the assault, while the community's vigilante vehicle and several motorcycles were set ablaze. Although the Kwara State Police Command has repeatedly denied the presence of bandits in the area, locals in Baruten are presenting photo and video evidence to support their claims. Baruten is approximately a 6-hour drive from Ilorin, the capital of Kwara State. Operatives of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps have arrested a man found in possession of a firearm inside a church in Bokos Local Government Area, Plateau State. According to Zagazura Makama, a counter-insurgency publication focused on the Lake Charge region, the incident occurred on Sunday. NSCDC operatives acting on intelligence apprehended the suspect during a routine security patrol around the church premises. Authorities have yet to release the suspect's identity, as preliminary investigations are still ongoing. Now to Plateau State. Christians across the 17 local government area of Plateau State have converged on Jos, the state capital, for a peaceful march against the incessant killings in some parts of the state. Organized by the Christian Association of Nigeria in Plateau State, the peaceful march to the government house is to formally present their grievance to the governor, Caleb Mufwang. Our correspondent in Jos, Chizabanyanwe, quoted them as saying, they hope this process will help their voice to put an end to killings. Now, Nigeria's Minister of Defense, Mohammed Abubakar, has restated the federal government's commitment in ensuring the safety of both lives and property of citizens, irrespective of their socio-cultural differences. Mohammed Abubakar was speaking during his visit in Plateau State to commiserate with victims of the April 2 killings in Basa local government area of the state by alleged herdsmen. News Central's Chizabanyanwe tells us more.
This visit of the Minister of Defense, Mohammed Abubakar, is his second in Plateau State in less than 1 year. He was received at the Yakubu Gowon Airport in Haipang by security chiefs in the state. This time around, he is here to commiserate with victims of the recent deadly attacks in Basa local government area of the state. He assured that everything is being done to ensure an end to these senseless killings.
We are working as a team, the state government, the community leaders, the security agencies, and above all, the command and directive from the president that this must end. And I am sure all the security agencies, the government and the state government and the different stakeholders are on this to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
He conveyed President Bola Tinubu's charge to security chiefs in Nigeria to fish out masterminds of the attacks for justice to be done.
The president is really committed on this, and he has directed that we must find the perpetrators of this evil and let them face justice. And the security agencies are investigating seriously, and we are on the trail, and God's willing, we'll get to the root of it, and the perpetrators will be apprehended, and they will face justice.
The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Nentawe Yowada, assured that support efforts for victims of the attacks have been initiated.
We're providing 1,000 hectares of land right inside the local government here to ensure that we cultivate the land for them. We've already acquired the land and they know the land already. And we've already signed an MOU with them before I left and came over this not today. And we are cultivating and ensuring that for every households, each household will be given half a hectare. So for the 1,000 hectare, we're targeting 2,000 people, household to benefit from the 1,000 hectares.
Right behind me here, inside this compound, is where we have the Minister of Defense and of course the Minister of Humanitarian Services, who have come here to pay a condolence visit on the traditional ruler of this community where these attacks took place some days back. It is hoped that their visit here will bring a positive turn in this community as well as in every other affected community in Plateau State. In Baruten Local Government Area of Plateau State for News Central, Chizoba Anyuwi.
Now, previously we brought you news that the President of Nigeria returns this Monday. That's today, after being away for 19 days. Joining us now for more on that is Courage Nsirimovu, a lawyer and civil rights activist from Port Harcourt, to discuss on this and the implications. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us, Courage. Now, Courage, the President is back in town, but the backyard has got a lot of cleaning, let's put it that way, if you allow my analogy. Where do you think President Tinubu should start from as he gets back to work today?
Thank you very much for that question. My thoughts are clear that Nigeria is facing lots of security issues. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Section 14, has mandated that the responsibility of the President is to ensure the security and welfare of the citizens of Nigeria. We've just looked at the news in Baruten Local Government, in Boko's local government. There has been killings for the past 2 weeks. So there is an emergency security issue in Plateau State and similar states that have suffered gunmen, Fulani, herdsmen attack, and all of such kind of attacks. So the President should come back, hit the ground running, to stabilize the situation. If you look at our history books, you'll find out that these incidents have been occurring, for the past decade. It has been, recurrent from some time to time in Benue State, in Plateau State, in Kaduna State, and then it even trickles down to the south also, Enugu State, and I mean, it's a recurring decimal. So it's something the President must, take, serious actions to ensure that, he stops the situation. I mean, coming to declare state of emergency in Rivers State, where we don't even have any breakdown of law and order, is something he should consider reversing now that he's back into the country, because there are places in Nigeria that actually need that kind of emergency, not Rivers State. So the President should set his priorities right.
All right. Now, Courage, I'm very thankful that you actually listed out some of these places that really need plenty of attention. So given the massive killings, especially in the North Central, what concrete steps can be taken to immediately stem the tide of the bloodshed?
Basically, the Minister of Defense, right, must work hand in hand with the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, which is the President, and strategize on how, to stop this spate of killings, because it's an emergency situation. These are human beings dying. So they must strategize and think of what's best to do in this circumstance. I followed your news and I saw that somebody with a gun was arrested So the police, the Nigerian army must come together to ensure that they do more of this preventive, see, hear the word I'm using, preventive arrests. So the approach now must be preventive, because the situation we have is that people get attacked, people get killed, and then that is when we see the reactions and the visits, and that does not help the situation. So they must begin to look at preventive measures to curb the attacks.
Courage, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon to give your 2 pence on the matter. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Now we go on a short break, and when we come back, we've got more news coming your way here on News Central. Stay tuned. Now, as Christians across the world take the weekend, the extended weekend, to celebrate the Easter celebrations, our News Central correspondent, Israel Iferobo, is out in Lagos to see how families are enjoying the occasion. Israel Iferobo, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Do tell us where your location is and what exactly is happening there as families are enjoying the Easter celebration.
Okay, so we are at the KICC Family Fun Day. It's a day after Easter Sunday, so this is Easter Monday, and the church have deemed it fit to organize and put together this Family Fun Day where everyone comes together to basically celebrate the risen Christ. And if you take a look around at what's happening here right now, there are lots of people here, families here, all gathered here to celebrate the risen Christ. Families, children, loved ones, they are all gathered here today to just have fun, unwind, and relax. And let's just take a round and just speak to a few people here. So, what's your name?
My name is Abokese Genesis.
Your name is?
Abokese Genesis.
Okay, so what exactly is happening here today?
Today is KICC Family Fun Day, where we come here, enjoy ourselves together, have fun with friends and families.
Are you excited to be here today?
Yes, very excited.
Fantastic. Okay, so the excitement never stops, and there is so much here that is happening. I will speak to Lyda here. Lyda is one of the people that put this amazing event together. Let's hear from her. Lyda, welcome. This is News Central Television. You're live. Tell us what exactly is happening here today.
So today we're having our Family Fun Day. We do this every Monday after Easter. So Easter Monday every year, and it's a fantastic event. We just come here to unwind, relax as a church family, and it's fun for everyone.
So is this about the church alone?
No, it's not just about the church. It's also about connecting with the community. So those in our immediate community as well are invited, and they come in. You can see some of the children on the bouncy castles. They're having so much fun. It's a blast for everyone.
Tell us about the food. We love food.
Of course, item 7 is always very important. So we had rice, jollof rice, spaghetti, amala. There was so much food and just more than enough to go around. And you know, it's been amazing.
What about the music?
The music has been fun. It's gospel music, of course, because it's a church event, but we've still been grooving. The mothers have danced, fathers have danced, children have danced. It's been fun.
Are you grooving?
I am grooving, as you can see.
Thank you so much, Lyda. Okay, so there you go. That's exactly what is happening here today. So much fun, so much excitement. It's Easter Monday, and indeed, if you're here, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm quite sure that you can get the feel of what the mood is like here in Maryland. Back to you to the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Israel Iferobo. Please do stay away from the bouncy castle. You are overage. Thank you. Moving on now. In a protest on Sunday, women in Guinea-Bissau attacked a Chinese-run zircon mining site in the northwest, setting fire to the equipment. The women said they were driven to act after the authorities ignored their complaints about the environment damage and mining activities were causing the environmental damage, the mining activities were causing their farms. Now, witnesses reported that several hundred women took part in the protests at Niquin, near the resort town of Valera, close to the Senegal border. The Chinese companies had been operating at the site since 2022. Interior Minister Boch Kande condemned the destruction, saying the facilities had been completely burned down. He vowed to send more security guards to protect the site during reconstruction, adding that the protesters who fled into the forest must be tracked down and arrested. Outspoken former ZANU-PF member and ex-war veteran Blessed Geza has called for a 2-day protest on Tuesday and Wednesday, demanding President Emerson Mnangagwa's resignation. Geza, who exited the ruling party under a cloud of corruption allegations, has been a vocal critic of the government, accusing it of failing to address Zimbabwe's worsening economic crisis. Meanwhile, Mnangagwa has warned citizens against relying on social media content, claiming that much of it is designed to sow division among the populace.
On Tuesday and Wednesday, 22 and 23 April 2025, Munuwese Kumba. Every Zimbabwean must stay at home. We must shut down Zimbabwe completely. This is to make a strong statement to Mnangagwa and his commanders. Shops, industries will not open. Copies will be packed. From the cervix of your home, police will not take us you. But if they ever come to you, you have the right to defend yourselves. Since my last address, I've been observing the political developments in our beloved Zimbabwe. On 31st March 2025, we made a strong expression of our displeasure with the way the country is being run. Mnangagwa responded by arresting 1 or 2 of our combatants. We stand firmly with them and assure them they will be released soon. We send the same message to detained journalist Blessed Mhlanga and all political prisoners of the Mnangagwa regime. Kunze kwa kutoyedza. Emerson Mnangagwa is going. There are no two ways about that.
Now, China has issued a stern warning to countries striking trade deals with the United States at its expense, vowing to take countermeasures as it intensifies tariff wars. Now, while most nations face a 10% U.S. tariff, Chinese goods are subject to duties of up to 145%. In retaliation, Beijing has imposed tariffs of up to 125% on American imports. The warning comes as South Korea, Japan, and India engage in trade talks with Washington, seeking preferential terms. Beijing has described those moves as acts of appeasement and has pledged reciprocal action to provoke. Speaking after a meeting with Indonesian foreign and defense ministers in Beijing, China's top diplomat Wang Yi called for openness, inclusiveness, and mutual benefits in international relations.
我们要始终坚持开放包容、互利共赢的合作理念，反对任何形式的单边主义、贸易保护主义。认为滥施关税将严重损害各国的正常经贸往来。我们同意坚守建设开放型世界经济的初心，倡导普惠包容的经济全球化，维护以世界贸易组织为核心的多边贸易体制，推动打造公正、公平、非歧视的贸易投资环境。
Nigeria's federal government is working to settle the debt owed to power generation companies for electricity supply to the national grid. The GenCos have warned that the unpaid debt threatens their operations and the country's electricity supply. Larry Elatuyi, electricity market analyst, joined Business Edge this morning and explained how Nigeria owed electricity generating companies 4 trillion naira debt.
After privatization, and the power sector was partially liberalized, a special purpose vehicle called NBET was established to be the broker between the GENCOs and the DISCOs. So MBET is owned by the federal government, funded by the federal government, supposedly funded by the federal government. So the essence of MBET is to provide that liquidity gap in the market. So over the years, DISCOs are now buying electricity with full payment. So they get electricity through diversity contracts, and whatever they collect at the end of the month, that's what they remit. By policy, government did not allow full implementation of this cost-reflective tariff. So there's something called tariff shortfall, which is supposed to come in the form of subsidy. And this subsidy is not cash-backed, and that has been the problem. So the invoice issued by DISCOs, GENCOs rather, on a monthly basis is not what we're paying. There's something called minimum remittance obligation, which is MRO. Even the MRO is not fully paid.
Now, sports. The Director General of the National Sports Commission, Honorable Bukola Olakpade, has arrived in Mauritius for a strategic meeting with Weightlifting Federation of Africa President Khaled Mahalhel. The high-level talks aim to enhance Nigeria's status in global weightlifting through improved athlete development, coaching, and international partnerships. Nigeria remains a dominant force in the sports across Africa and beyond. Mahalhel, who also chairs the IWF Development and Education Commission, plays a key role globally. Olakpade said the NSC remains committed to expanding opportunities for Nigerian lifters and strengthening ties with international sports bodies. Nigeria's Flying Eagles have landed in Cairo ahead of the Africa Under-20 Cup of Nations tournament beginning this coming Sunday. The delegation of 24 players and 9 officials led by coach Aliyu Zubairu arrived Sunday evening and are staying at the Jewel Sports City and Aqua Resort. The 7-time African champions will play a warm-up match against tournament host Egypt tomorrow at 4 p.m. Nigerian time. Nigeria opens their tournament campaign against Tunisia next Thursday at Cairo's 30 June Stadium. The competition serves as a qualifier for the FIFA Under-20 World Cup in Chile later this year, with all 4 semi-finalists earning spots in the global tournament. The team's first training session is scheduled for this evening. And that's all this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our major stories brought your way. World leaders have reacted to the passing of Catholic Pontiff Pope Francis, and President Bola Tinubu is expected back in Nigeria on Monday, today, as vacation in Europe comes to an end. We also told you that Zimbabwe's war veterans have upped the tempo, calling for 2 days of protest and the resignation of President Emerson Mnangagwa. Remember, you may send your eyewitness reports to the WhatsApp number on your screens now. And do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live at DSTV, channel 422, GoTV, channel 23, StarTimes, channel 274, Avo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.